Hello and welcome to the West Asia Post. I'm your host Ghadi Francis and I am back for your weekly update and ground report from the world's most volatile region. Well, we live in a region where between 1 week and the other a full-blown war had started. We will talk about the center point of the focus of everyone around the world. This week I will take you inside the Gaza tunnels and we will walk the Israeli-Lebanese borders. Before getting into that, let's take a look at what's making the headlines in the region. Israeli forces give 24 hours to over 1 million Palestinians in the north of Gaza Strip to move southwards. The IDF are expected to launch a full-scale ground offensive days after formally announcing total siege of Gaza and relentlessly bombarding the region. The United Nations says it is impossible to evacuate over 1.1 million Palestinians in 24 hours, warns of devastating humanitarian consequences. Egypt beefs up security along the borders with Gaza. Thousands of security forces have been deployed to prevent a breach of its borders as Israeli forces prepare for a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. Several nations, including Turkey, Jordan, and Egypt, urge for humanitarian corridors through Gaza to deliver aid as the region runs out of food, medicines, and other necessary supplies. Israeli forces launched simultaneous missile attacks on Syria's airports in its capital Damascus and the northern city of Aleppo. The attacks damaged the runways, putting both hubs out of service. At times like these, it is really hard to get to the truth. Everybody is very polarized. Even a lot of fake news is all out there. Now, it has always been like that. For a journalist, you really want to go there and to find out what is really happening. Now, Gaza has been under siege for more than 15 years. And 10 years ago, as a journalist, I actually went there. The only way there is through a tunnel underground. Now, these tunnels have become the only lifeline to this besieged part of Palestine. It is the only way to get medicine, humanitarian aid, people and activists and journalists like myself, but also it is the only way where Hamas could get their weapons. Now, today, in the middle of this war, everybody wants to know more about these tunnels. So we bring you back my report from 10 years ago, exclusively tonight from Gaza tunnels on WION. Take a look. This is a part of the world where I couldn't have reached without going through underground tunnels. Gaza is a city older than Christianity, Islam and Judaism. A caravan point of strategic importance from the earliest times, it was constantly involved in the wars between Egypt and Syria and the Mesopotamian powers. Today, amidst the Israeli-Palestinian conflict still on, Gaza is a besieged strip measuring 360 square kilometers. The only way there is through Egypt, so I flew to Cairo first. From Cairo, with an Egyptian taxi driver crossing over the Suez on a bridge named Peace Bridge, we reached the Sinai Peninsula. This is Al Arish, the last stop before the borders. When I reached Rafah, the official borders were closed because there is a blockade on Gaza. So I had to go with the locals to this other area where the houses have hidden rooms leading to the underground tunnels. It is somehow like a bus stop moment. This man is a Tunisian on his way inside too to stand in solidarity with the people of Gaza. As we emotionally wait, the colleagues who work in Gaza radio stations were able to get me a permit, and I was allowed in the tunnel. It is a 4-minute walk with the dangers of death any moment. Israel could bomb us here, or simply the tunnel might collapse. Why the tunnels? Because ever since Hamas Islamic Resistance was elected and given control over Gaza, Hamas's victory prompted sanctions by Israel, the United States, and the European Union, each of which had placed the organization on its official list of terrorist groups. A series of sanctions that included power cuts, heavily restricted imports, and border closures. These tunnels to Egypt remain the source of food, fuel, medicine, electronics, weapons, and obviously, people. Inside Gaza, the only self-governed Palestinian piece of land, we get to have a closer look on what Hamas is and how it governs. I interviewed fighters, secular and Islamic, activists, feminists, musicians, opinionated college students, and politicians. I found out that Gaza people are not all so happy about the Islamic Hamas's government, but when under war, there's no luxury to oppose the armed group defending you, some said. I found out that there is an Orthodox church and around 1,500 Christians living here. I found that they use the Israeli currency and export agricultural products. Regardless of the high levels of poverty and overpopulation here, some of the politicians managed to make millions of dollars. I discovered the Qatari flags on the boats of the fishermen, the Turkish statue at the besieged port, the Iranian flag at the checkpoint between Gaza and the Israeli troops. I discovered that Hamas is the link between Iran and Qatar, and that Gaza might be their common ground. I met this man who was injured in the war but kept on fighting, till he later was killed while protesting with a flag, and now is known as one of the bravest martyrs of Gaza. We discovered ancient history in the streets, where every conqueror, crusader, Canaanite, Persian, Arab, Egyptian, Greek, Roman, or Ottoman Empire resided for a period of time. But most importantly, I learned from the man who lived here in this building, Napoleon Bonaparte, that Gaza is the outpost of Africa and the window to Asia. It was back then when he occupied it, and it will always be. Ghadi Francis reporting from Gaza for WION. World is One. While Hamas might be an outlaw to most of the world, in this part of the world, in West Asia, it has supporters, groups, allies, and even states with it. I'm talking about Hezbollah of Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Hashd al-Shabi of Iraq, Yemeni Houthis, and other militant groups all around West Asia. Now, would they all enter in a full-blown war? This was a question. Did something happen in Lebanon? Yes, it did. Hezbollah did tit-for-tat attacks. Will this become a full-blown war on the Lebanese front line as well? This report tells you more. While Hamas fights Israeli forces in the south, there is action brewing in their north too. There is a palpable tension in the air, and a key player has the ability to change the course of this war. To the north of Israeli borders is Lebanon, home to one of the most powerful militant groups in the region, Hezbollah. For days now, Israeli forces are also engaged in artillery fire with Hezbollah militants. While both have a past, tensions began rising again after Hamas gunmen called for their allies to join the war against Israel. Hezbollah responded to the call of brotherhood and, in an act of solidarity, fired missiles targeting Israeli military bases in the contested Mount Dov region. The violence at the Lebanese front began on the third day of Israel's war with Hamas. In the Lebanese town of Dahaira, 3 IDF soldiers and 3 Hezbollah gunmen were killed in the crossfire.
The controlled yet consistent attacks have become a cause for worry. US warned Hezbollah from getting involved in the war, while the Iran-backed militant group made no formal announcement of entering the battleground. The attacks on Israeli forces show a sign of solidarity with the Palestinian movement. But why has Hezbollah's support to Hamas made Israel nervous? Unlike Hamas, Hezbollah is a powerful militant group. It is West Asia's most powerful military organization. As compared to the Gaza Strip, Lebanon is officially a republic, and Hezbollah its protector. The organization has a deep war chest of sophisticated missiles, rockets, in addition to an arsenal of other ammunition. It is an army, much larger than Hamas. Hezbollah has unlimited backing by Iran and has its roots in other nations as well, including Syria and Iraq. The last time Israeli forces clashed with Hezbollah was during the Lebanon War in 2006. 120 Israeli forces and over 1,000 Hezbollah fighters were killed in the month-long clashes 17 years ago. The ongoing attacks are a stark reminder of what happened then.
So in this part of the world, in Lebanon, when we're speaking about Hezbollah, when we say Hezbollah and Israel are at war, it is not something new. It is actually relative. They haven't been at peace, but they haven't had a full-blown war since 2006. Tit-for-tat attacks, drone attacks, assassinations have always been here. Every year, every month actually. So what is happening now at the borders is not considered a full-blown war, and yet it can be something else. Is it really going to become a full-blown war? And if so, if more than 15 years ago Hezbollah was able to preserve its land on Lebanon, what would a future war between Hezbollah and Israel be like?
In simple terms, Hezbollah's official entry in the war could mean that Iran has entered the conflict with Israel, a possibility that makes the latter nervous, knowing that it will then turn into a full-blown war in West Asia.
Now, this assault recently started on Saturday, but this war did not start on October 7. Palestinians for decades have been killed. Their homes have been taken from them. They're waiting for a resolution. They're dying with a lot of silence from humanitarian committees all around the world. In the next report, we bring you a little about the history of this conflict. Take a look.
The attack on Israel by Hamas has left the world in shock and divided. In many across the Western and Arab world, thousands of people took to the streets to show their support for the Palestinian cause. Many also rallied behind the Hamas attack. Some have gone to the extent of saying that this assault was a long time coming. But war never begins overnight, and the week of brutal conflict is no exception to this rule. So the eternal question rises again: what triggered the attack on Israel? And another question: how far back does history go in one of West Asia's most volatile regions? In 1917, Britain conquered then Palestine and ruled the region for decades, till April of 1948. In 1939, Britain issued a white paper to declare the region as a quote-unquote bi-national state. What it means is that the region would be inhabited by both Jews and Arabs. This was the British mandate for Palestine, a document which opposed the creation of a separate state for Jews and Arabs. And now it is being blamed for triggering decades of volatility in the region. 9 years later, after the mandate and just a month after Britain pulled out of the region, the civil war between Israel and Arab nation turned into a full-blown war. Israel declared independence on May 14, 1948. The United Nations and several Western countries immediately recognized Israel as an independent nation. But what marked a day of independence for one was a day of calamity for another. May 14, 1948 is what Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, which translates to catastrophe. Since then, several reports and survivor accounts reveal horrifying details of Palestinian dispossession. During the Nakba between 1948 to 1950, Israel's military forces expelled at least 750,000 Palestinians from their homes. They captured more than 3/4 of the territory. The Palestine that was ceased to exist. What now remains of it is majorly the Palestinian settlement across the Gaza Strip, West Bank, and contested parts of Jerusalem. But the ouster of Palestinians from their homes did not end there. It only got worse. Israeli settlers forcibly took over the homes of Palestinian families in Gaza and East Jerusalem, a move ignored and often silently encouraged by the West. The visuals you see next form just one such case, capturing the story of what thousands of Palestinian families have endured.
You know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
It's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
You are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one is allowed to steal it, ya ammi.
And unfortunately, that's not all. For years now, Israeli forces have controlled the flow of electricity, fuel and food supplies into Gaza. The move snowballed into a major economic crisis for the Palestinian residents, at least those who survived countless raids by Israel over the years. The League of Arab States has deplored the brutality of war and has called for a dire need for dialogue.
What is needed is resurrecting a serious negotiation track based on the two-state solution with international support and reference to the United Nations resolutions to end occupation and establishing a Palestinian state on June 4, 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. We have seen Western viewpoints focusing on this war and this event only, while avoiding talking about the reasons behind the current situation in Palestine. There is a need to return to real peace process that leads to the establishment of two states, coexisting in peace, safety and stability.
The situation yet again has raised the same old concern. The world needs to pay attention and work towards a two-state solution. The history of what many Palestinians lament as systemic oppression has triggered a slew of clashes with residents in West Bank and Gaza on the losing end. And so the eternal question remains: till when will the world turn a blind eye to a history of despair and the Palestinians' call for getting their homes back?
Coming back to this part of the world and this side of the story, we have spoken about the history of the conflict, the Palestinians, Gaza, the Gaza tunnels, Lebanon, Hezbollah, how the world could stand. But what we did not speak about is the human cost, is the children, the more than 1,000 civilians. In the next report, we bring you a story of injustice, cruelty. Where is humanity? This is the cry of the children of Gaza as they get bombed, without electricity, without water, and without a passage if they really wanted to flee. Take a look.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. يا رب عليهم. استشهد أبوك.
This is Gaza today. A coastal town once home to over 2.3 million Palestinians. It is now full of debris and destruction all around. Buildings have turned to rubble. A massacre is unfolding.
We call on all Arab countries and all countries to help stop the bombing on Gaza. Every day, more and more die. Not one day passes with less than 50 people dying. Every day they shoot at civilians, children, women and the elderly. We don't know where to go. We're staying here in this school.
Family members are scrambling through the rubble, looking for any sign of life that remains. Or, at the least, bodies of their loved ones. Between the sounds of missile explosions are survivors crying out for their families, their children.
I have lost my father, my brother, my uncle, 2 cousins, 2 of my extended family, my pregnant wife, and I am the only survivor.
We left our homes, thinking that we would return in an hour. We left our belongings, money, food, and everything we owned. Now there are 50 people in the house without food, drink, water, or electricity. I do not know how we will provide food for our children. I am searching here under the rubble for the remains of lentils and rice, even a little for my children.
The hospitals in Gaza paint a more horrifying picture. On-the-ground realities, overflowing with bodies of the dead. Doctors and paramedics are trying to make do with the limited medical supplies they have. But this is not even the worst of the problem. As the air raids continue over Gaza, people have nowhere to go. Hundreds have taken shelter at school buildings that are still standing. Only time will tell for how long the roof remains over their head. To make matters worse, Israel has cut off all supplies to Gaza. The region's border with Egypt has been bombarded. Neighboring countries are unable to send in aid. Trucks full of supplies turned back under heavy missile fire. It seems as if being alive amid endless attacks is a crime.
It's a dire situation in the Gaza Strip that we're seeing evolve, with food and water being in limited supply and quickly running out. WFP is on the ground and is responding, and we're providing food to thousands of people that have sought shelter in schools and elsewhere across the territory. But we're going to run out very soon.
Israel is pushing over 2 million Gazans to starvation. The situation is the worst kind of humanitarian crisis unfolding, even as we speak. Proving yet again that the worst kind of ramifications of war are borne by the innocents who have nothing to do with it.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, always bringing you exclusive ground reports, updates, and news from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I am Ghadi Francis, signing off from Beirut, Lebanon. Keep on watching WION. World is One.